The last 14 months have been very challenging for brass bands and indeed all musicians and the arts in general. Despite that, we've seen lots of new forms of creativity during lockdown, and I was keen to explore this with three special guests: Philip Harper, composer and musical director of the Corey Band; Kenny Crookston, chair of Brass Bands England; and Jonathan Bates, composer, performer and musical director of Strata Brass, the first section winners of the recent Corey online brass competition. I began by asking Kenny what has changed for brass bands in terms of our use of technology during this global pandemic.
I think there's no doubt that the whole world, actually, I was going to say the whole country, but the whole world has certainly changed the way that we operate in relation to technology, and I think that's been the biggest change for brass bands as well. And it's pretty impressive, actually, the number of bands that have embraced what's out there very, very quickly. And there's no better example than the Corey competition that Phil has been involved in a couple of times, really encouraging and helping bands to get to a new place with something that was completely unfamiliar to almost everybody 14 months ago, as you say. So I think that's been a fantastic development. And in terms of the outreach that's given certain bands as well. I mean, bands have been featured on BBC television, and it's been, I don't know how many millions of views Corey have had for some of their lockdown videos. But just that, the improvement, even the improvement in the standard of the second Corey competition against the first one, I thought was remarkable. I thought it was really remarkable to see how many bands had raised the game. So really impressed by that. If there's one kind of noticeable difference, I think that's probably it, is the focus that people have put on and gained that extra value from that process.
Yeah. And Phil, what about your thoughts on that?
Well, in terms of the competition, it was very interesting, isn't it? And obviously it suddenly became necessary to utilize new technology to get our brass band performances out there. And I agree with Kenny, really. The standard at the high end of the bands that entered our competition was absolutely phenomenal. And was evidence of an incredibly steep learning curve. Like you say, just a matter of months, really. We were really heartened by the number of bands that actually took part in that contest. And some of them, even for the second contest, were obviously dipping their toe into the new technological waters for the first time, which, as we all know, is quite a leap of faith, isn't it? Yeah. Others had been now doing these virtual performances for months and months and had reached such a high technical level of delivery. The winning band of not just the championship section, but in my view, of all the sections this time, were just really something to write home about. And of course, one of the winning bands was Strata Brass, conducted by Johnny Bates.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, this may help us develop new audiences. I'm just wondering, Johnny, just for Strata Brass, has that been a surprise for the band to suddenly find, on YouTube, lots of people are watching what you're doing? Maybe that was always the case for the band, but I suspect not.
No, it's as you say, it's something I think we need to kind of embrace, and we have been doing even before the pandemic started. That there's been a strong feeling that brass bands need to embrace technology and find new ways of promoting themselves, not only for concerts but online and building the presence. Because obviously we all love a movement, but outside of movement, there's still a very kind of like archaic stereotype associated to our movement, which we want to kind of change as quickly as we can. So it's been good to kind of just guide people down that route and not force them as such, but kind of say, well, here's an opportunity, here's a platform which you're never going to have again, possibly this kind of brilliant format. So try and embrace it and try and use it. And as I say, the amount of bands, I think the Corey competition was close, if not over 100. I say the Foden's one we're associated in running is over 100 as well. So there's bands not just on our shores but around the world which are being encouraged by it. And I think going forward, that's what we're going to need to do, because people are going to need to generate new audiences. Just due to concert venues, not all the bands in the country are able to play in concert venues which hold 2,000 or 3,000 people. If we want to reach those numbers, then we're going to have to do something online, whether it's live streaming, whether it's kind of music videos like we've been seeing. So it's certainly been a welcome addition. As you say, if there's any positive thing we can take out of the pandemic. I think it's certainly going to kind of open people's eyes within the movement as to what is possible with use of technology.
Yeah. Again, in the Corey contest, I don't know what the figures have been on YouTube, but I imagine they are just staggering. Just in terms
it's been viewed far and wide. I mean, tens of thousands of views. And we found, I mean, not just our competition, but the stuff that we've actually done at Corey Band, and Kenny asked the question earlier, but in the last year, we've actually reached over 5 million people with our various bits of content, which as a number is like something that we could only have dreamed of before the pandemic. And that's kind of testament to what Johnny was just saying, really, about, as a means to an end of reaching people. This is, we've got the numbers to back it up.
Yeah. And certainly, I know in my own case, we never would have believed Downshire would have appeared in Radio 3, having done a lockdown piece. I mean, that was kind of wow. For the band, that was a kind of pinch yourself moment. And other lockdown things we've done have just been picked up by BBC Northern Ireland as well. So there's obviously, it's not a perfect thing for everybody, and it's maybe not the most enjoyable thing for individuals to do, but it has certainly kept people busy. I'm just curious about, as composers, has this also had an impact on your thinking, Johnny or Phil, just in terms of?
I mean, it kind of has to, because it is a very, very different method. I mean, certainly at the very start, when we started making these videos around a year ago, the idea of rubato and tempo changes was just an absolute no-no. It's 4/4 click track, begin to end one tempo. But we're starting to find ways around that. But I mean, there is still limitations to what you can expect to achieve in bedrooms around or kitchens around the country. So you do have to slightly tailor it. But I mean, that was one of the reasons in my kind of publishing company wanted to get involved with the Corey competition and encouraging new music, because yet again, I mean, it's something the movement's been crying out for in recent years, is a new generation of composers coming through and writing for the movement. And if they can see, not only is it going to be played by 28 people sat in band formation, but actually if they're going to write a piece which can then have visual effects added, it actually opens a completely new world to what you can achieve in your writing as well as performance. I mean, I presume Phil's probably along similar lines with that.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, I remember back to that project you did before Christmas, the Christmas Carol, which obviously had a lot of new original material in and was designed purely for this format. And as such, right from, all of these elements can be baked in, the narration and the visuals and the storytelling. And, it sort of opens up a few other avenues to a composer that we wouldn't usually get in the concert hall. And ultimately, a composer is a communicator, isn't he or she? So, the more means that we can get to reach our audience and communicate to them, the better. And this obviously is definitely a way of reaching new audiences. And also, it's not that a band sits down at 7:30 on a Saturday and plays a performance, and if you're there, you've heard it, and if you're not there, you haven't heard it. These things stay there in perpetuity on the internet, don't they? And you can have people viewing and experiencing your music and sharing it with you for forevermore now.
For better or for worse, I suppose. Kenny, I'm just wondering, just in terms of brass band entertainment, whether we learned anything from some of the online work that might have a positive impact on how we do entertainment and more broadly.
I think so. I mean, I think the proof of that one will be the proof of that particular pudding will be in the eating. Maybe when we get to Brass in Concert in November, for instance. It's because it's always been a bit of a thing, since Brass in Concert went to the Sage in 2005. I'm sure Phil will agree with me here. There's been quite a variation in quality of the let's say, the technological parts of the performance. We've had all sorts of attempts at some ideas that I'm sure work better on paper than they did in reality. But I think there's probably going to be a much more realistic view of what can be, one, achieved, and two, what will actually work for the people in the hall now on that front. And I suppose I'm a bit of a traditionalist. I like the entertainment to be in the music as much as possible, and you'd hope that's where, as brass bands, we would achieve our cultural outreach, if you like, would be through the music that we play rather than let's say the ancillary stuff. But it's certainly given us time for reflection, doesn't it? This last 12 months, And if anything else, I mean, creative minds like Johnny and Phil, they're the ones that really do these things. They're the ones that produce the music. So you'd hope that them and others will have had enough time to actually come up with some great ideas as well. But I think that the way that the bands approached the things like the Corey contest and the improvement that we saw in that, you'd hope that that's going to shine through and bleed through, and not just for the bands at the very top, but for all the ones that we got to Butlins next year and around as well. We'd hope to see the same from them.
Mm-hmm. One thing that struck me in some of the Corey second contest was just the level of performance, but as in presence on screen. I mean, there were some bands where every single person was contributing to, the kind of the energy that was palpable in the videos or in the playing, and it wasn't just relying on one or two people at the front who were, wearing funny hats or whatever they were doing. It was something really, quite special. And so, like you're saying, it would be interesting to see how that carries on onto the stage in due course. So interesting. Obviously, I was saying earlier on, it's a bit tough for players. I'm just wondering, have you any sense? I mean, any players I've been working with have just been astounded hearing themselves played back when they hear them, their home recordings. And I guess it's a useful lesson. I'm just wondering what your experiences have, been for that, because it's to say it's not that pleasant, but is an interesting learning curve.
It's a bit like your own voice on a recording, doesn't it? You always think it doesn't sound like you hear it when you're actually speaking. So yeah, I've never been one for listening to my own playing too much, to be honest with you. But one thing that has happened in the last 2 months is I've started playing again. After 4 or 5 years and really not playing very much at all, I've started playing again. So maybe I've been inspired by watching some of these things I've seen on there.
Goodness me, this is something that no one wants to hear.
Well, music lovers everywhere were celebrating for the last 5 years, Phil, but that's long enough.
Well, thankfully we've got some very good sound editors now.
Well, Johnny, you out of the three of us, you've probably been the one that's done, participated in these projects as a player most. So how has that experience been for you as a player?
It's been very different, as you'd expect, because, the big thing I found, having not only taken part as a player in the videos, but also adjudicating solo competitions online, is it's incredibly hard to gauge where you fit in an ensemble. Because normally if you sat in a band, you'd think, okay, I'm playing too loud, I need to take the dynamic down and things like that. When you're playing to a click track, you've got nothing to jump off. There's no reference points for intonation or for balance. So you do end up finding quite often that dynamics are quite hard to achieve. And certainly the bands who really stood out in the Corey event managed to kind of get that level across at the same point. But certainly from a playing perspective, it's good. It's good practice because, if you can kind of discipline yourself to make sure you don't just submit something on a one take, whilst we're keeping our lips in doing these things, you're also kind of keeping up the standards because you don't want to submit something which is going to be substandard because you can't blend. I know I said there's no reference points, dynamics and intonation, but there's also no hiding place. If you send a recording to your conductor and it's full of splits, poor rhythm, lack of detail and things, it's going to stick out. So you have to almost kind of self-scrutinize yourself, which again is going to be maybe a slightly different pressure to what you would put yourself in a video, a live performance where there's a bit more hiding room.
Yeah, I think listening back to those things, you maybe hear things in either your tone or your tuning that you maybe don't realize when you're kind of in the band room playing with everybody else or practicing at home, because as Kenny says, it's like when you talk, obviously part of what you hear is conducted through the bones in your face into your ears, and it's the same when you're playing, obviously from your embouchure. So I do think for some people it's been a real awakening. I've had an interesting experience. A number of people coming forward to play solos who wouldn't normally ever play a solo, and they just have found this as I want to play another one of these online quartets with 4 different parts, and that's been interesting to see, people see that as an opportunity for them to shine a little bit in that space. Just coming towards the end of this, I'm just wondering, do you think this has any longevity in the longer term? Do you think, Phil, we might have another Corey contest, or do you think? I know Whitburn have got their event coming up in the summer, but I'm just wondering, is there a space here for something to continue in this vein alongside all of our other contesting activities.
Yeah, there's a few events still coming up, aren't there? And Johnny already mentioned the Foden's March event as well, which Corey evented, and the Whitburn one as well. I mean, in answer to your question about would Corey do another one, I mean, we did the two we've done out of necessity, really. And as anyone who watched will have heard me say at the end of the last one, I hope we don't have to do another one, because obviously the implications of that will mean things have gone backwards. Yeah, let's hope the need isn't there to do another one. But, you know, if it is, I guess we'll be there, be there again.
I think that's the thing. We all hope that there's no necessity for it, but it might actually be that we've opened a Pandora's box here. And is it a bad thing? You know, is this just going to be another branch of brass banding that is something that we do, say, in the winter time or the summertime or whatever?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've already started thinking at Corey about what events we can actually tailor to be online in the future, because obviously there's one big advantage that there's more than one, but the one I'd pick out was international. I mean, you can bring people together from all over the world without them leaving their countries, and have participation in events that are, you know, have a truly international feel to them, without the need for all of that air travel and, you know, all the expense that entails as well. So that's something that we really need to tap into, I think.
Yeah. And another element to that, Phil, is that technology is going to improve as well. So the current difficulty we have, you know, playing together on Zoom is impossible, you know, actually doing it live together. But there'll come a time when that's no longer impossible. I'm quite sure it'll be able to be done. You know, it's come so far in the last few years. That's just something else that's going to.
I hope I'm retired by then, because for me, music is all about live. And, you know, as a musician, my main skill is as a listener. And obviously, when you're online, it's, as you said, it's impossible to use that skill and develop that skill. So I, for one, can't wait for things to go back to being live again. I do think there's a place for some of the digital stuff. But, you know, if it was majority 95% live again, then I would be happy.
I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly agree on that, because in terms of international element, you mentioned there, you know, there's a lot of bands who, for example, I don't know, in Australia or Japan and Singapore, who would never normally be able to take part in entertainment contests, simply because there isn't Australia, but, you know, like Singapore and Japan, they don't have these massive sections of bands. So actually them taking part in a couple of contests is pretty rare. And I think, I mean, personally for me, I'd love to see a couple of these events carry on. Either an entertainment contest year or a Whit Friday thing, because it gives the bands who've developed all these skills over these last 12 months a reason to keep them going. Because the last thing we want to do now is, having built up this brilliant bit of momentum with people's editing skills and creating new material for the band in innovative ways, the last thing we want is that to just suddenly say, oh, we don't need it anymore now, we're not going to use it. We want to at least somehow, for me, keep that going, so bands have a reason to keep innovating and keep a kind of experimenting with technology too. So I certainly think I'm with you, Phil. I mean, obviously we want to see 95% minimum back to live, because it's what we all love doing. It's the reason we do it. But I certainly think in terms of the longevity of the movement and the kind of development of it, it'd be good to give bands something to work towards, which keeps those skills in check.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and just to pick up that point you made earlier, Johnny, as well, about the marketing skills, which I think these are the video skills are transferable into marketing, aren't they? So if we can end up with, you know, a new skill of people that can put together really zippy marketing videos which look amazing and result in someone physically going to one of our concerts, that's a big win.
Well, the biggest problem that I've recognised in brass banding generally, actually, is probably the public perception of what we do. They literally think that, you know, the vast majority literally think that all we can do is what you see in Brassed Off. You know, it had a lot of great things about that film, but, you know, it did a bit of damage to our perception as well. I think anything that we can do to improve that's a good thing, and there's no doubt that a lot of these recent videos and everything have been fantastic for that. So let's hope that's one element that can really be carried forward.
Yeah, and of course we could be live streaming concerts and all sorts of stuff in the future. That could potentially be a great avenue for reaching those audiences, and contests, of course, as well. Great. Listen, thank you all so much for taking part. Lots to think about, but of course, fingers crossed, we all get back in our band rooms as quickly as possible. Can I just say massive thank you, and look forward to seeing you in person at a future contest in the coming months. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Michael.